as the Executive Director of AWAB, which is the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists. The group started in the early 90s, and I think within the 5th year, Binkley had become part of that. As you know, our partners are the Alliance of Baptists, the American Baptist Churches USA, and AWAB. And we have international partners, but in the United States, those are the 3 main groups that we partner and affiliate with, and AWAB is one of them. And Brian lives in Cleveland, Ohio, is from, Dan was from, her husband was from Cleveland. But is from Toms River, New Jersey. Any New Jerseyans? Oh, really? Are you from Toms River?
Might be really weird.
I lived in a few places, Simsbury, or that was the Connecticut one, Princeton.
Okay.
Couple other places.
Okay, very good. Not far from Princeton. Yeah, great.
And then after education in Philadelphia, Brian went out, pastored in the Philadelphia area, and then went to Denver, Colorado, where for over 2 decades he was pastor of 2 significant American Baptist churches in Colorado. Calvary Baptist, a church that many of us know of because of Brad Berglund, our shared friend Brad and Rita Berglund. And then most recently, the First Baptist Church of Denver, in downtown Denver, I believe. And now he is in this role as executive director. So we're really happy that you're here on this day particularly, talking to us about the history and what are churches doing right now in this era, this moment where support, I guess you saw this past week, support for LGBTQIA+ is diminishing in the United States. Well, yes and no, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so Brian's going to figure all that out for us. Brian Henderson, everybody.
Thank you, Marcus. Marcus pretty much just said what I was going to say, so I think we're going right to Q&A now. I think so. You introduced me and told about AWAB's history, so we're good. Thank you. It's good to be here and good to be with everyone. I really want this to be more informal than formal, but I do have some PowerPoint slides that I'll kind of walk us through, and then we'll finish with some question and answers. Along the way, if something pressing kind of hits you and you're like, no, I want to ask my question now, just jump in. It's okay. What I'd like to do, a few things. I'd like to begin with, since this is kind of the traditional Christian Ed Sunday School hour, begin with a devotional of sorts, if that's all right. And then from there, share a little bit about AWAB, as I share a little bit about my own journey and story, which is kind of interweaved with AWAB, and then kind of give you a sense of what AWAB does, what we're doing, and where we're hoping to go. And then we'll finish with some Q&A. Does that all sound okay? Right. Good. And I am notoriously behind with technology. And so if all of a sudden I'm talking about something and you're thinking, what he's talking about is not on the screen, just kind of say, hey Brian, catch up a little bit. So it's good to be here today at Binkley Baptist Church. And I do want to acknowledge it is pretty significant to be standing behind this pulpit, which was the pulpit that folk preached from for the first 5 years of Binkley's existence, which is really significant. The first church I served I served 3 churches, 3 American Baptist churches in my career. First church was outside of Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, the nearest American Baptist congregation to the then national offices. And about probably 6 years into my pastorate there, we had a church fire. And so we lost a third of the church. We lost the original sanctuary space. We were church members whose children were baptized there, whose children had been married there. It was a hard time. But through that time, we wound up connecting with many more people in the community than we ever imagined we would. And one afternoon, we get this phone call from this couple out in Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is probably 35, 40 minutes from where American Baptist is. And they said, years ago, we bought this piece of what we thought was a unique piece of furniture in an auction. And it's been sitting in they had this estate house out in Westchester. Westchester was a pretty bougie part of town. And we had this piece of furniture, and we're wondering if you might be interested in it. And it was the original 1846 pulpit of the church. So the pulpit came back, and it was kind of, so to be standing behind the historic pulpit again is kind of meaningful for me today, so thank you. Let's see, this is where technology comes in. Megan, I'm doing my best. I had to turn my clicker on. There we go. I want to begin with a devotional thought by poet Andrea Gibson from their book, You Better Be Lightning. Andrea Gibson died in 2025 after battling cancer. They were only 49 years old. They were the poet laureate for Colorado. The poet laureate term usually is 4 years. They died 2 years into their time as poet laureate. But from their book, You Better Be Lightning, I want to read this poem. And the poem follows this sequence, and this is why I have it here, so that as I'm reading it, you're not thinking to yourself, why is Brian repeating this one phrase over and over? Queer youth are 5 times more likely to die by suicide is the title. And then in the course of the poem, it follows, queer youth are 5 times more likely to die by suicide means you live 5 times harder than you have had to. So just so that as you're listening, you can follow along the sequence. It's not that long of a piece. Queer youth are 5 times more likely to die by suicide means you lived 5 times harder than you should have had to still have a body when you graduated high school. Means hate worked 5 times harder to make your spirit its wishbone. Means when your mother asked what was wrong, you were 5 times more likely to believe you'd lose her if you spoke the truth. Means you were 5 times more likely and more often told that you'd go to hell when you died. Means burning for eternity seemed 5 times more doable than another day in the school lunchroom. Means you were 5 times more inclined to triple padlock your diary. Means you were 5 times more likely to stop writing your own story down. Means I write my heart out now. I graffiti billboards with the page of my diary the bullies used to start the rumors. I tie that page to the end of a kite string and run a crooked line through the straightest mile of the Bible Belt. That page is a protest sign. That page is a bandana washing the tear gas out of my lover's eyes. Queer youth are 5 times more likely to die by suicide. Means I sneak into fascist sleepovers and sharpen my pronouns onto the faces of senators who voted to criminalize my kisses when I was 19. I cut the hate mail. I cut the hate out of my mail and paper-mache Christmas ornaments for queer couples whose parents do not want to know their grandchildren. I hack high school curriculums and delete every test that does not ask what the P in Marsha P. Johnson stands for. I walk through graveyards with a chisel, correcting the names of trans kids whose families said no when asked, "Can you just let me live?" I paste the suburbs with spray paint, editing the welcome mats of homophobes until they all speak the truth, that they personally burn the roof over the heads of queer youth are 5 times more likely to die by suicide. Means there are many days I thirst for my own silence, but walk through the desert screaming instead because, like most of my queer friends, don't have a child. But I have millions, from Nebraska to Chechnya, to the Baptist church where I grew up. My pride in them is a parade I know won't keep them all alive, but I keep cutting my diary into confetti to throw at their hopes. When they float by scared or furious or laughing or in love and desperate for the headline to say, queer youth are 5 times more likely to offer to walk their younger siblings home from school, to notice the different accents of sparrows, to find an eyelash and spend 20 minutes trying to pick what to wish for. 5 times more likely to never outgrow blanket forts, to know there is a word for the scent in the air there after it rains, to see lifelines look like telephone wires and call a friend who's having a bad day. 5 times more likely to adore the last man who walked on the moon just because he wrote his daughter's initials there. To know there is no universe in which they would not be proud of their own children. Queer youth are 5 times more likely to see you, how you dream of seeing yourself, to write something in your yearbook that will get you through the next decade, to spot a stranger crying and ask if there's anything they can do to help. 5 times more likely to need us to do the same. So, I don't know if you have heard of the Trevor Project. Many of you probably have. But the Trevor Project reports, on average, annually, 1.8 million queer-identifying young people will attempt to take their life. 1.8 million. They'll attempt to take their life not because they are queer-identifying, but because of how they are treated or mistreated. Thinking about that number a little bit differently, breaking it down, every 45 seconds, a queer-identifying young person between the ages of 13 and 24 will attempt to take their life. So that means by the time most of us leave after the luncheon today, nearly 150 young people will have made an attempt on their life because of how they are treated or mistreated. It's a heavy number, a heavy statistic to begin a session like this on the beautiful days we have, right? AWAB's hope is that every 45 seconds, an LGBTQ plus identifying young person in all folk will find a Baptist home like Binkley, where they can be fully and freely who and how they are. And so that's what gives me passion to do the work of AWAB, to know that we have the capacity to continue to create spaces where people of all ages and from all backgrounds may be who and how we are. So I want to share a bit about AWAB. Our office is located in Louisville, Kentucky, if you were wondering. I'll say more about that in a bit. AWAB, the Association of Welcoming Affirming Baptists, is a network of welcoming and affirming congregations, organizations, and individuals who are willing to go on record as welcoming and affirming of all persons without regard to sexual orientation and or gender identity or expression, and who have joined together to advocate for full inclusion of LGBTQ plus persons within Baptist communities of faith. Our vision is that there will be a day within Baptist and all church communities of faith when no one shall feel excluded, and our mission is to create and support communities of churches, organizations, and individuals committed to LGBTQ plus inclusion. And I'll say more about that as we go along. Our purpose is fourfold. We seek to provide support, education, and theological expression to congregations and organizations, to strengthen connections among congregations, to support families and individuals, and to advocate for a faithful voice in support of LGBTQ plus human and civil rights. We have a board of directors who I work with every month. I meet with a group of AWAB-like organizations from different denominations. And honestly, it's a good group of folk that do good work together, the collective of queer Christian leaders. But in our meetings each month, I tend to hear from other executive directors of like organizations how challenged they are with their board. I am here to say, AWAB is so fortunate to have the board of directors that we do. We've got a dynamic board that represents folk from the Alliance, that represents folk from American Baptist churches, from the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, folk from the north to the south, from the east to the west, folk who are allies and folk who are queer identifying. So you can see some of our board members here. We currently have a board of 14 folk, and again, we are just really blessed to have the group of folk that we do. We have a staff of 3. We each work independently from where we live. So I live, as Marcus said, in Cleveland, Ohio. Janet, our administrative coordinator, she lives in Louisville, so she manages our office, so to speak, for us on a day-to-day basis. And then James Rice is a neighbor of yours. He is, am I gonna get this right? He's in Charlotte. So is that down from here? Yeah. So down west, James is in Charlotte. Janet's a member of Crescent Hill Baptist Church. James is a member of St. Luke Missionary Baptist Church. And I am, just for the record, my membership technically is still at First Baptist Church of Denver. So, staff. Now, just a quick little aside so that you can get to know a little bit more about myself and my own journey. If you don't know, I came out later in my life. I grew up going to a conservative Baptist academy from 2nd grade through my first year of high school, where I was taught pretty unequivocally, this is how people are supposed to be, and this is how people are not supposed to be. I also grew up with a cousin who I was young enough that I didn't fully understand everything. My cousin was gay. What I did understand was that he was handsome and he always dressed very fashionably, and he was going off from New Jersey, he was going off to LA for all these photo shoots. And I was like, well, I want to do that someday when I grow up. But my cousin Mark died in 1988. He was one of the initial waves of HIV/AIDS. And I watched how his family treated him. And as I watched how he was treated, I thought to myself, I don't ever want to be treated like that. And so the message of I'm not supposed to be the way that I am continued to be reinforced. And I know all of us, each of us that have come out, we each have our own journey and story to tell. And each of our stories is significant, and I would say sacred. But just a quick glimpse of my own life story. Probably if I was to think hard about it, and I have thought a bit about it, particularly in therapy, but when I was in 3rd grade, I was asked to be the star of a musical called Kids Praise. I don't know if you've heard of it. It featured Salty the Singing Songbook, so I got to be Salty the Singing Songbook. And I'll never forget getting fitted for my costume. And I just thought to myself, as a 3rd grader, I think there's something different about me. I didn't know what it was at that point in time. But when I put that makeup on and I got into character, there was a freedom that I felt that was really significant. And then as I got older and into middle school, I went off to clown college. We started a clown ministry at our church. It was a silent ministry, so the clowns did not speak. But again, I discovered something in middle school and into high school. When I put my makeup on and stepped into the character of BJ, which are the initials of my name, Brian Joel, but I was spelled Beejay. When I got into character, there was something freeing. I knew that I could just be who I was. And then I often share this picture. This was a picture of me just outside of Niagara Falls up in Canada. It's a church camp. And I use this picture to show how, for years, that look kind of captured my sense of, I know there's something more about myself. And I think I was looking at a cute guy across from me on the bus there. But I was, to be honest. But that picture kind of is where I stayed, kept in a closet until I was 38 years old and it came out. So there's more to my story, but today is not about my story, it's about AWAB. But let me just finish with this about my own journey. This is an older, relatively recent picture of me and my 3 kids. I have a daughter who just graduated college, and a daughter who's about to be married, and my son here, Anna, Naomi, and Joel. I share this picture to say I am very fortunate, even after having come out, to still have a really close connection with my children and with their mother and our extended family for the most part, although every family has its challenges, right? But I share this picture to share, and this is not in a woe is me kind of a way, but one of my children, because of friends and influences, has taken a much more conservative approach and understanding to human sexuality. And so while you're hearing from the Executive Director of the Association of Welcoming Growing Baptists today, I share this to say, I know my own journey, while it has been in many ways hard and yet good, and I'm glad to be where I am today, I live like each of us do with realities that are just what they are. And sometimes we can allow them to keep us stuck. Or we can recognize them for being what they are, and we can keep moving forward. On my best days, I keep moving forward. On my days when I'm struggling, I'm like, why does this have to be the way that it is? And I think that is life. But it can be hard for us to think about changing our minds, right? I'm prayerful and hopeful that one day my one child will change their mind. But when I think about changing minds, I know, especially in Baptist circles, it can be hard to change our minds, especially when it comes to matters of theology, when it comes to matters of human sexuality. This is a quick story about Ann Judson. Many of you know Adoniram and Ann Judson, the first missionaries to leave the shores of America to go to Burma. They left as Congregationalists, but they became, en route, they became Baptists. And so they are really the founders, if you will, the inaugurators of the Foreign Mission Society, for what today we know of as American Baptist Churches USA. But while they were en route, they were Congregationalists. And at this period of time, to change from one church orientation to another was hard, right? I mean, it's one thing to go from an Episcopal church or a Methodist church to a Baptist church today. We don't have to think about it too much. But in the era of Ann and Adoniram Judson, it was not the same case. And so while they were en route, they meet a friend, and their friend introduces them to the Baptist sentiments, if you will, of this is what it means to be a Baptist. And Ann Judson is curious. She's thinking about the implications of what it would mean to move from being a Congregationalist to being a Baptist. And in her journal, she writes this: "But I must acknowledge that the fact of the Scriptures does favor the Baptist sentiments. I intend to persevere in examining the subject, and I hope that I shall be disposed to embrace the truth, whatever it may be." Get this, it is painfully mortifying to my natural feelings to think seriously of renouncing a system which I have been taught from infancy to believe and respect, and to embrace one which I've been taught to despise. Oh, that the Spirit of God may enlighten and direct my mind, may prevent my retaining an old error or embracing a new one. When I am listening to and having conversations with Baptist congregations, different from Hinckley, Baptist congregations who are still trying to figure out, can we be welcoming and affirming or not? At one level, I want to affirm for them, it's really hard to make that shift and to make that transition. I get it. It's real. Someone once said, by and large, as human beings, we don't resist change. We all change, right? We've changed our clothes since the time we woke up this morning. We changed from our pajamas into some of us have changed our hair, right? Some of us changed the color of our hair sometimes. We know what change is. What we resist is being changed. And so I appreciate this here. It is hard to shift from what we've been taught to embrace something that's new and different. And it helps me to remember, even when I'm thinking about my kids and my family, when I'm thinking about people who see things differently than I do, I try to have a reservoir of empathy and sympathy for people who don't know what they don't know. So just a little bit of Baptist history. Thinking about AWAB and how we have grown. I like to show this image just simply to see, so that we can see American Baptist Churches USA have about 5,000 congregations. The Cooperative Baptist Fellowship has about 1,800. The Alliance has about 130-ish, plus or minus. AWAB, I'm proud to say today, since 1997, when Binkley joined AWAB, which at the time, there may have been about 30 or 40. Today, we now have over 200 member churches. I was telling Marcus that our last board meeting was the first board meeting in about 4 years where our board was not reviewing applications for membership, which was significant. The board was kind of like, oh no, is everything okay? And it was. It just so happened to be the timing of the year, I think. But since then, which was just a few weeks ago, we've actually received 6 applications. So AWAB continues to grow. And we are growing today, not just within American Baptist circles, which is where historically AWAB came from, but we are growing across we like to say now, across the Baptist landscape. So honestly, I think the growing edge right now are at this former Southern Baptist congregations who are largely identifying within the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. We've got Alliance folk. We are also intentionally trying to be more intentional about connecting with BIPOC communities as well. Historically, AWAB, which did begin, as Marcus said, in 1993, it began largely within American Baptist life and largely among Euro congregations like Bingley, right? So today, we are very intentionally trying to reach out and connect beyond that. And so we have member churches throughout, and I'll say this later in the service, throughout the United States, Canada, the Caribbean, and across the continents of Africa and into Eastern Europe. So we are a growing community of welcoming and affirming churches. And speaking of welcoming and affirming churches, closer to home here in North Carolina, you can see there are, Marcus, you asked me this yesterday, there are actually technically 18 churches in North Carolina that are part of AWAB. Some of them are closer to you, I know, neighbors here to Chapel Hill. But I would say, as your LGBTQ group team of people here at the church are thinking about what can we do, what are we doing, be intentional, Dennis, about looking at the churches that are here in North Carolina and seeing what can be done collaboratively and even collectively. On AWAB's website, which is awab.org, we have a map and you can go state by state and see where all of our churches are. So I wanted to highlight who was close to you, neighbor-wise, in North Carolina. And then AWAB does have, in the last 3 years, we've begun to create a program or partnership relationship with educational institutions. One of our goals and objectives is to help individuals, students, connect with institutions of higher education that are overtly welcoming and affirming, and we want to help those institutions who are overtly welcoming and affirming connect with students, particularly when it comes to clergy who are looking for calls. So right now you can see Fletcher Seminary, Colgate Rochester, Kosher Community School, Baptist House, Matt Perkins School of Theology, SMU in Dallas, and then Sophia Theological Seminary in the Crossing Campus Ministry, which is at UW-Madison. We are, I can't say this publicly yet, but we're about to receive another educational partner that comes from Texas, which we're really excited about. So,
Yay!
I don't know if you know,
Yay!
Texas is really big.
Hallelujah.
AWAB, last year we were able to make available our history, which was published, written by Delane Tu, who is a member of Baptist Church of the Covenant down in Birmingham, Alabama. Delane is a retired historian, and so she went through our archives and put together AWAB's story. She weaved the welcoming and affirming movement, starting in 1973, not 1993, starting in 1973. So she weaved it all the way up to the present. She weaved it around the Baptist movement of welcoming and affirming churches, around the LGBTQ movement as it was evolving in the U.S. So it's an interesting side-by-side story of what was happening nationally, of what was also happening within Baptist life. And there are numbers of stories that I can share out of this book. I'm going to share one of them later during the service, but another one is back in 1973. So AWAB was formed officially in 1993. In 1973, there was a group of Baptists that got together and said, we need to do something to support each other. These were each, there are three of them, they were each queer identifying. And they said, we need to do something with the Baptist life to create a safe space for us so that we know that there's a place of support and safety for us. And so that began what became known as American Baptist Concern. The first president of American Baptist Concern was Reverend Louise Rose. Reverend Louise Rose was an out lesbian African-American clergy person. Get this, in 1973, serving what would become one of our founding churches just outside of Philadelphia, Central Baptist Church in Wayne. And I share Louise's story to say, one, she was a woman ahead of her time. And she was showing how I think, in many ways, Baptists, at our best, are often humans ahead of our time because of our commitment to justice and equality. and equity. So one of our tasks is to lift up the voices and the names of people from our history, which again, I'll do a little bit more during the service later. And I'm going to leave a copy of this book for the church library. And so you can read for yourselves stories of those who gave shape and form to the welcoming and affirming movement within Baptist life. Some of the things that AWAB does annually, we offer 2 awards. Speaking of our past, 2 individuals stand out. These were 2 early leaders of American Baptist Concern, Robert McNair and Rick Mixon. So we have the annual McNair Award, which is given to a layperson who has been committed to LGBTQ plus inclusion in any number of ways. And then the Mixon Award, which is given to a clergy person, queer or ally, who themselves have contributed to LGBTQ plus inclusion. So you can see the list of individuals who have received these awards over the years. So that's one thing that we're excited about. And just within the next 2 weeks, we'll be announcing the 2026 McNair and Mixon awardees. We also have an annual lectureship, which we started about 5 years ago. And so these are some of our former lecturers. This year's lecture is going to be taking place in Minneapolis at United Theological Seminary. That is led by Molly Marshall, whose name some of you may know. And we are grateful to be able to be there and to have our annual lecture. Our annual lecture is about to be named as well. We're just at that time of the year where these announcements are just about to go out. So we are excited about this. And this is our attempt to keep the academy and the church connected. Because we are convinced that as we are informed from a scholarly point of view about our history and realities of human sexuality, as we bring those realities into the local church, we can build stronger churches who are doing intentionally greater work in the area of being welcoming and affirming. And then some things that we are doing, will be doing. We have a podcast out right now, Voice of the Turtle, which we're really excited about in partnership with Good Faith Media. You can go to our website, click on the link, and you can see our first season where we have 8 episodes, and we've interviewed the likes of Paul Rauschenbusch, and we interviewed Cliff Matthews, who was the pastor of St. Luke Missionary Baptist Church down the road and to the west from here in Charlotte, and a number of others who are, we interviewed them so that we could learn from them a little bit more about AWAB and its history and how their work in ministry is making an impact in the lives of folk today. So check out our podcast, Voice of the Turtle. The Voice of the Turtle was the original, back in the, starting in the 70s, was the name of the newsletter that American Baptist Concern began to use. And the tagline was, in order to make progress like a turtle, you gotta stick out your neck. And so at the end of every episode this season, I asked our interviewees, so how would you encourage people to stick out their necks today? So maybe that's a question for us this morning. AWAB will continue to support congregations and individuals with welcoming ministry. We're going to continue our Voice of the Turtle podcast. We're looking at creating resources for folk to use in church settings and in other settings. If you go to our website, we have a resource library that in time is going to be revamped and even more accessible for folk. We are co-sponsoring, along with Baptist News Global and Good Faith Media, a breakfast in the General Assembly of the Concord Baptist Fellowship in just a few weeks, just 2 weeks actually, down in Jacksonville, Florida. And we are looking to expand our advocacy and our staff capacity. By the end of this year, the board has asked me to hire 2 more staff to help us build out the work that we're doing. We're going to be looking to, and this is kind of a heads up for anyone here, thankfully, that might have an idea or an interest. We're looking to hire a program coordinator and then a membership coordinator. If you ever need swag, Binkley can call us up. Janet, whose picture you saw earlier, will send you whatever you need free of charge. She probably won't even ask you to pay for the postage. So know that we are available. It was exciting for me to walk in yesterday and to see the box of Pride swag that AWAB sent to Binkley. And I hadn't seen it yet myself. I had seen pictures of it in our meetings, but I hadn't seen it for myself, so it was really exciting. We do have a monthly donor program called the Rainbow Circle. If you are so moved to support AWAB on a monthly basis, begin for as little as $10 a month. There are folk that give $10 a month. There are a couple of folk who give $1,000 a month. But know that this is an opportunity from our website if you want to know how you can support our work more regularly. And then just kind of a quick commercial. American Baptist churches, this is significant. American Baptist churches, particularly, specifically American Baptist Home Mission Societies, during the month of June, in the spirit of pride, is hosting a series of queer conversations. American Baptist churches is hosting a series of conversations that are queer-oriented. Really significant. Many thanks to our leaders at ABHMS for having the courage to put this program together. You can go to ABHMS. You can use that QR code if you're fast and get information about these conversations. I know I'll be helping with one of them, but we've got a series of experts from across the country who are going to be offering their thoughts and perspectives on any number of realities related to LGBTQ+ stuff today. This is a list of, sometimes a church will ask me, how do we live into our welcoming and affirming statement? And there are some churches that have had welcoming and affirming statements for years, and they're still trying to figure out how we do this. Marcus, I went through this list myself, and I thought, well, as a Thankfully Baptist Church, you're doing it all. So at one level, be affirmed, Binkley. Dennis, be affirmed for the work that you're helping to give leadership to even. Binkley has lived into its identity of being welcoming and affirming in really meaningful, significant ways, in ways that I think should be emulated, and that others can be learning from you. So at one level, be affirmed, but know that there are always more and more ways to live into your welcoming and affirming identity in a way of being. Ideally, Seattle First Baptist Church, one of our charter congregations, has been welcoming and affirming now, honestly, for almost 35 years. And they've been marrying folk longer than that, same-sex couples longer than that. But folk there would say, you know what, we have been doing this for so long, and we've been so committed to being welcoming and affirming, that it used to be, 15, 25 years ago, if you came to Seattle First Baptist, you went there because they were welcoming and affirming. Today, you still go there because they're welcoming and affirming, but the reality is folk join, and they're joining a community that it's just who they are, to be welcoming and affirming. So ideally, that's what a congregation wants, to get to the point where you don't really have to think about it. You just be who you are. So some Q&A, if anyone has any questions about AWAB, about myself, journey, ministry, what life is like for churches today. I get to connect with folk literally every week, north, south, east, west. And when I say north, even north of the border, we have a growing number of churches in Canada that are joining AWAB. And the reality is, every church is experiencing, particularly here in the US right now, is experiencing the weight of this current administration in different ways. Yes. And I have colleagues who reflect the rainbow, right? Who are gay and lesbian, bi, who are trans, who are non-binary, who are asexual, the rainbow. And as I connect with them, I'm hearing different stories. I was with one trans, actually just this past week, on Thursday morning, I was in a meeting, and a colleague of mine who's trans was talking about getting ready to take a trip this summer, and that they were scared to take that trip. And so they are doing everything they can not to get on a plane. So they are taking a bus to a train, and then the train to a city where they're going to get picked up by her. So trans folk, particularly, and non-binary folk, are feeling the reality of this administration in different ways. I say that to say, 2 Sundays ago, I was in service sitting next to a trans woman who's a friend, and she is a surgeon in Dallas. And as I talked with her, I wanted to hear, how is she feeling things? And she said, Brian, I'm not feeling it much at all. I'm going to work and I'm doing what I do, and it's okay. And she's aware of the realities, but she's also aware that her own reality close to home is not the same as my colleague this past Thursday was sharing about being afraid to just travel. So I say that to say, Marcus, in response to your comment earlier, depending on where you are in the country, you're feeling realities differently. And so I think the challenge for us is to be aware of what is happening so that we know how to be sensitive, but to do what we can locally, close to home, to make a difference in the lives of those who are going to be sitting next to us in the pew, perhaps, even here at the family. It is a tough time, and yet it is also a time for us to not get so scared that we become paralyzed, but that we continue to do what we can, as Binkley is doing, to create a safe space for everyone to be fully and freely doing how they are. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I was surprised when I saw your list of North Carolina churches, just knowing that there were a few on there that, or not on there, of churches that I know are functionally affirming, but, and I know that it is kind of a Baptist thing to be a little slow to adopt labels, right? Well, can you speak to that? Like, I guess, kind of getting over that last step of, like, what's the hold up on a lot of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we do have a name for those churches, and it's a good name. It's not a bad name, but we have a kind of a category that we call the murky middle. Churches that are just about ready to make that decision, but are still, you know what we have? We want to make sure we call our pastor first. We want to make sure we have one more meeting. We want to make sure. So, and we do have kind of a little bit more than an informal list of churches, but a couple of things. One, if you know of churches like that, you know, it would be helpful if you just reached out to say, hey, you know what? I just was in a meeting with folk from AWAB, and I think it'd be a really neat thing for you to connect formally with AWAB, kind of help nudge that church along, or those churches along. The other piece is, at this point in time, I think it seems like, particularly in the US, but even north of the border in Canada, the politics of our time actually is causing churches that have been in that murky middle to just finally say, you know what, we need to do this because lives are literally at stake. So there are plenty of churches like that. There will always be churches like that. Our challenge is, one, to identify them, and then to figure out strategically how to reach out to them. And my approach is never, you know, we don't want to grow just because we want to grow. We don't want to grow because we have a budget to make, but we want to grow because every 45 seconds, we want to make sure there are safe spaces for folk to be. And when you join AWAB, the church that's joining AWAB I think it's good for that church, but it's also good for AWAB, because the more we know that we are not alone, the stronger we can be.
One of the reasons I enjoy your, I'll call it paradigm here, being affirming, is that I'm also aware that the Native Americans share every single detail here, hello, and they are physically identified because of their physical features, so they're also targeted. And they're the last, it seems to me, the last group to be like included, well, let's include our Native American friends.
Yeah.
Like, they're out west, we don't think about them, but they're also here.
Oh, they are.
So, you know, and my heart goes out to them because of their high suicide rate, especially among the teenagers.
That's
It's
right.
terrible. It's
That's
terrible.
Yeah. And they are, when I referenced us intentionally wanting to make sure that we're connecting with BIPOC communities, Native communities are definitely part of that group of folks.
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely.
So important.
And I like to say, I say this somewhat humorously, couple of facts. I shared with you one fact, 1.8 million young people. Another fact that I like to share is that, I don't know if you know this or not, Ella and I were talking about this I think the other night, queer folk are everywhere. No, they really are. And I can say that because I have been to Rapid City, South Dakota. I have been on presentation there. And there are, obviously, right, even indigenous folk are queer folk. I was walking the streets of Tbilisi, Georgia, and not outside of Atlanta. This is Eastern Europe, Tbilisi, Georgia. And there were queer folk there. Queer folk are
the son of the chief of the Lakota tribe is about, I don't know, how tall is he? 7 feet tall, blonde hair, blue eyes somehow,
Yeah.
and queer as,
The day is long.
it is like, oh my God, dude.
I think one of my personal goals in my capacity as AWAB's executive director is to help normalize for Baptist churches what has always been normal. And one of the things that's always been normal is that we have all been sitting in the pews together, queer and straight. So yeah.
For a lot of people who are afraid of these different people, they probably know people in all those categories and don't know they know.
That's right. Exactly. You know, when I was at First Baptist Denver, First Baptist Denver historically has been a welcoming and affirming church, and like very welcoming and affirming. And I can regale you with stories about that. But there was an older member of the church that came up to me one morning after service, an older gay member of the church, been there for, oh my goodness, BJ was probably, he's still a member of the church, 40 years. And the church, over the years, has, like churches, it grows and then it declines and it grows. But at one point in time, we had a disproportionate number of trans members. And half of them you would not have known if they were trans, if you didn't know that they were trans, right? So BJ comes up to me, he goes, you know, Brian was an older gay man who you know, was around in 1969, right? And he said, you know, Brian, I don't know. If we get many more trans members here, I don't know if I'm going to be comfortable staying here as a member of my church. And I was like, BJ, of all people, you have been leading the way for inclusion. And so I say that to say, he did not realize how many trans folk were actually in the pews. And so yeah, to your point, we have all been sitting together. When I was growing up as a kid, a little bit before that, actually about the picture of me in the Salty, the singing songbook costume, my dad was a painter, and he was painting the Presbyterian Church of Toms River. And I tell you what, the Presbyterian Church of Toms River, if you moved to Toms River, that was the church you wanted to go to, that you wanted to be seen at. And this is the early 80s. And Robin was the minister of music. He too was as queer as the day is long, but no one ever talked about it, right? But everyone knew it. And I think when we think about our music programs, especially over the years at our churches, queer folk have been sharing their gifts for a long, long time.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying about the interviews that you were doing on the
Yeah.
podcast, what's the way in which we can stick our neck out?
That's it. Thank you. I usually ask that question to people, right? I would say, maybe, if we're talking specifically about Pinkler, as individuals, I think one of the ways we can stick out our heads is by paying attention to people around us, supporting folk, affirming folk. I was in Dallas two Sundays ago, and a woman after Sunday school came up to me, older woman. She said, I was in the grocery store, and I saw 2 men walking a baby in a stroller. And I just decided I was going to walk up to them and say, is this your child? And she said, and they both said, yes, he is. And she said, well, I just want you to know, I think the 2 of you are amazing. And I hope you continue to be great parents. One of the ways as allies that we can stick out our necks is by being courageous enough to maybe say something so affirming that we wouldn't ordinarily say, because we're kind of uncomfortable about, should we say this, or is someone going to hear me say it? For those of us who are queer identifying, one of the ways that we can stick out our necks is by coming alongside our allies, and when we feel as if they don't get it, kindly say, you know what, let me tell you something from a different perspective, and I think we can support each other in communities like this in some significant ways. And the reality is, at this point in time, historically, we need spaces where we know we've got support from each other. Good. I think people are getting up, so I'm guessing we've got to transition into the sanctuary space. So thank you.